In the year 9 CE Common Era, Augustus Caesar, formerly Octavian Caesar, introduced the law Lex Papia et Papaya, named after its authors and the closest and most trusted colleagues of Augustus, Quintus Papius Secundus and Marcus Papius Mutillus. This law punished men who refused to marry and have children, especially men of higher rank who refused to marry and have children, because the example always comes from the top. It's the top that dictates trends, and if the top doesn't want to get married and produce children for the state, then the plebs will quickly follow suit. The law imposed a heavy tax on single men and banned them from many public events, such as games and theaters. At first glance, the latter doesn't seem like a particularly severe punishment, but by being banned from public events, these men were essentially banned from networking, which was highly important in Roman society. Therefore, the punishment could be considered as a form of domestic ostracism. And Augustus felt compelled to pass such a strict law exactly because so many Roman men were embracing the androcentric, freedom-loving, whore-maxing, pragmatic, anti-natalist lifestyle in its purest form by simply refusing to get married and have children. The famous Roman poet Juvenal, who lived in the 1st century CE, wrote in his Satire 6, "Are you even in this day and age preparing both a prenup and an engagement, and getting a trim from a master barber, and you have even perchance given the pledge to her finger? You certainly used to be saying, Posthumus, are you really getting married?" Even back then, when you married a virgin who was basically your property, and you could fook as many sex slaves and prostitutes as you wanted after getting married. Even back then when Rome was the richest and most powerful androcentric empire in the world. Even back then when Roman patricians had 100-acre properties and 2,000 square meter villas. In other words, a lot of fucking space to keep away from their wives and children, as opposed to today's house Negroes who all live with their masses in tiny boxes. Yes, even back then, many Roman men, and not just mere destitute plebs, but wealthy patricians from storied Roman families, still preferred to live the carefree life of whoring, athletics, wine, and philosophizing. Compare that with today's soy-addled, gynocentric cucks so desperate to sell themselves into a lifetime of monogamy and indentured servitude to a toxic cum dumpster massa, not a virgin, mind you, not property, mind you, but a toxic cum dumpster massa. Compare that with today's soy-addled gynocentric cucks so desperate to produce the next generation of worthless, unnecessary cogs in this gynocratic machine. And some of you may say that marriage rates are going down. Men are opening their eyes and refusing to marry. Nonsense. It's sleuths who are refusing to marry. Every fertile 5+ out of 10 sleut has a line of potential house Negroes 100, if not 1,000 strong, who are all just waiting for a green light to put a ring on it and dutifully serve. Many Roman men saw absolutely no benefit in getting married and bringing children into their world to serve the state and the emperor by paying taxes and fighting in wars. For back then, even patricians had to serve the state in war. In the role of officers, of course, but nevertheless, it was real warfare, real famine, real pillage, real pestilence, real marching, real danger in near and distant regions. Truly, only the most well-connected VIPs and friends of the emperor could avoid serving in war. Unlike today, where only the plebs face real danger and serve as cannon fodder. Meanwhile, anybody with some money and connections sits safely and comfortably on an aircraft carrier or back in America calling the shots via satellite. So Augustus had to pass his laws, because the individual man, his short, tragic life, and life is tragic, boyos, and his needs mean nothing in a military state, even in an androcentric military state. So Augustus had to pass his laws, much like Lycurgus, the lawgiver of the military state of ancient Sparta, banned prostitution and ostracized unmarried men. From Plutarch's Lives. Lycurgus also put a kind of public stigma upon confirmed bachelors. They were excluded from the sight of the young men and maidens at their exercises, and in winter the magistrates ordered them to march around the marketplace in their tunics only. And as they marched, they sang a certain song about themselves, and its burden was that they were justly punished for disobeying the laws. Besides this, they were deprived of the honor and gracious attentions which the young men habitually paid their elders. So Augustus had to pass his laws, much like Hitler in Nazi Germany demonized and banned prostitution, and passed a bachelor tax of up to 5% of a man's annual income. From Mein Kampf, prostitution is a disgrace to humanity and cannot be removed simply by charitable or academic methods. Its restriction and final extermination presupposes the removal of a whole series of contributory circumstances. The first remedy must always be to establish such conditions as will make early marriages possible. Yes, transform young men into house Negroes as soon as possible, working hard, paying taxes, living in little boxes with their masses so they can produce some cannon fodder before they themselves are shipped off to die in wretched conditions for the state and the elites. And so, according to the ancient Roman historian Cassius Dio, Augustus gathered all the Roman patricians in the Forum to give a speech on the importance of marriage and family. He divided the patricians into two groups, married and unmarried. I'll read parts of the speech now. You can find a link to the full speech in the description of this video. First, he speaks to the married men. Though you are but few altogether in comparison with the vast throng that inhabits this city, and are far less numerous than the others, who are unwilling to perform any of their duties, yet for this very reason, I, for my part, praise you the more, and am heartily grateful to you because you have shown yourselves obedient and are helping to replenish the fatherland. The fatherland. For it is by lives so conducted that Romans of later days will become a mighty multitude. We were at first a mere handful, but when we had recourse to marriage and begot us children, we came to surpass all mankind, not only in the manliness of our citizens, but in the size of our population as well. Indeed, even of the gods themselves, some are accounted male, and others female. And the tradition prevails that some have begotten others, and some have been begotten of others. So even among those beings who need no such device, and here he's referring to the immortality of the gods, therefore they do not really need to procreate because they are immortal. So even among those beings who need no such device, marriage and the begetting of children have been approved as a noble thing. You have done right, therefore, to imitate the gods, and right to emulate your fathers, so that, just as they begot you, you also may bring others into the world. That, just as you consider them and name them ancestors, others also may regard you and address you in a similar fashion. That the works which they nobly achieved and handed down to you with glory, you also may hand on to others. And that the possessions which they acquired and left to you, you also may leave to others sprung from your own loins. For is there anything better than a wife who is chaste, domestic, a good housekeeper, a rearer of children, one to gladden you in health, to tend you in sickness, to be your partner in good fortune, to console you in misfortune, to restrain the mad passion of youth, and to temper the unseasonable harshness of old age? And is it not a delight to acknowledge a child who shows the endowments of both parents, to nurture and educate it, at once the physical and the spiritual image of yourself, so that in its growth another self lives again? Is it not blessed, on departing from life, to leave behind as successor and heir to your blood and substance one that is your own, sprung from your own loins, and to have only that human part of you waste away, while you live in the child as your successor, so that you need not fall into the hands of aliens, as in war, nor perish utterly, as in a pestilence? These now are the private advantages that accrue to those who marry and beget children. But for the state, for whose sake we ought to do many things that are even distasteful to us. How excellent and how necessary it is, if cities and peoples are to exist, and if you are to rule others, and all the world is to obey you, that there should be a multitude of men, to till the earth in time of peace, to make voyages, practice arts, and follow handicrafts, and, in time of war, to protect what we already have with all the greater zeal because of family ties, and to replace those that fall by others. Therefore, men, for you alone may properly be called men and fathers, for you are as worthy to hold this title as I myself. I love you and praise you for this. And I not only bestow the prizes I have already offered, but will distinguish you still further by other honors and offices, so that you may not only reap great benefits yourselves, but may also leave them to your children undiminished. I will now go over to the other group, whose actions will bear no comparison with yours, and whose reward, therefore, will be directly the opposite. You will thus learn not only from my words, but even more from my deeds, how far you excel them. After this speech, he made presents to some of them at once, and promised to make others. He then went over to the other crowd, and spoke to them as follows. A strange experience has been mine. Oh, what shall I call you? Men? But you are not performing any of the offices of men. Citizens? But for all that you are doing, the city is perishing. Romans? But you are undertaking to blot out this name altogether. Well, at any rate, whatever you are, and by whatever name you delight to be called, mine has been an astonishing experience. For though I am always doing everything to promote an increase of population among you, and am now about to rebuke you, I grieve to see that there are a great many of you. I could rather have wished that those to whom I have just spoken were as numerous as you prove to be, and that preferably you were ranged with them, or otherwise did not exist at all. For you, heedless alike of the providence of the gods, and of the watchful care of your forefathers, are bent upon annihilating our entire race, and making it in truth mortal, are bent upon destroying and bringing to an end the entire Roman nation. For what seed of human beings would be left if all the rest of mankind should do what you are doing? For you have become their leaders, and so would rightly bear the responsibility for the universal destruction. Bethink you, therefore, what wrath would justly seize the great Romulus, the founder of our race, if he could reflect on the circumstances of his own birth, and then upon your conduct in refusing to beget children, even by lawful marriages. How wrathful would the Romans who were his followers be if they could realize that after they themselves had even seized foreign girls, the Sabine women, you are not satisfied even with those of your own race, and after they had got children even by enemy wives, you will not beget them even of women who are citizens. Do you desire to live apart from women always, even as the Vestal virgins live apart from men? Then you should also be punished, as they are, if you are guilty of any lewdness. Shaming the whoremaxers. You talk, forsooth, about this free and untrammeled life that you have adopted, without wives and without children. But you are not a whit better than brigands, or the most savage of beasts. For surely it is not your delight in a solitary existence that leads you to live without wives, nor is there one of you who either eats alone or sleeps alone. No, what you want is to have full liberty for wantonness and licentiousness. Yes, of course the Roman patricians don't sleep alone. They sleep with a multitude of sex slaves of prime slave cane. Until, of course, it's time to really go to sleep. Then they tell the cane to vaporize. Until morning. How indeed could I be a good ruler over you if I could endure to see you growing constantly fewer in number? How could I any longer be rightfully called father by you, if you rear no children? Therefore, if you really hold me in affection, be eager now to become both men and fathers. Oh. Lofty words, lofty sentiments. Harsh words, harsh sentiments. And one could definitely argue that he speaks sense. So much sense that I was almost compelled to install Tinder and begin looking for a toxic Kumdumpster massa to serve and start a family of cogs with, so that Europe doesn't perish, so that mankind doesn't perish. For Rome would have never become a civilization, an empire, without Roman men procreating and moving forth. And the same must be said for every other civilization and empire in the history of mankind. We would not be here today, sitting in the safety and comfort of our homes with electricity and running water on our computers watching YouTube, if it weren't for the billions of men that came and died before us. And that is the point. We are not an obscure tribe of men in antiquity trying to survive and build and conquer and become an empire. And we never will be such an obscure tribe of men living in pre-industrial times. We are living at the peak of a highly technologically advanced global civilization in a connected world that numbers 8 billion people. And my pragmatic, androcentric message is always directed at those who are alive today. Carpe diem, carpe diem. You have absolutely no rational fucking reason to have children and throw away your free and untrammeled life, in the words of Augustus. Every single reason you can think of will be connected with ego, boredom, vanity, external validation, emotional dependency on a massa, and a deep-seated and completely outdated, and therefore irrational, biological need to spread your genes and become a pigeon, a house negro, a beast of burden. Break the gynocentric biological and social programming. Nature wants you to be a beast of burden. Nature wants you to sacrifice. Society wants the same. Break the programming and fook them all. You have absolutely no reason to bring a life, any life, but especially a male life, into any world, but especially our modern world. As Sophocles wrote, "Not to be born at all is best, far best that can befall. Next best when born, with least delay to trace the backward way. For when youth passes with its giddy train, troubles on troubles follow, toils on toils, pain, pain, forever pain, and none escapes life's coils. Envy, sedition, strife, carnage, and war make up the tale of life." And as Augustus said in a very different and much shorter speech, "If only I had never married, or had died childless." Yes, Augustus Caesar said those words. The man who gave that lofty and vicious speech, shaming and castigating unmarried and childless Roman men. That very man, Augustus, at any mention of his daughter or her 2 disgraced children, would remark, "If only I had never married or had died childless." He had just one biological daughter named Julia, who gave him 2 grandchildren, and he had to banish all 3 of them for their disgraceful conduct. The Roman historian Suetonius writes in his Lives of the 12 Caesars that Augustus, quote, "never alluded to them," his daughter and grandchildren, "except as his 3 boils and 3 ulcers." And Suetonius further writes that Augustus divorced his daughter's mother, Scribonia, because he was, and I quote, "unable to put up with her shrewish disposition." At this point, it's worth recalling his lofty words about wives from his lofty speech trying to shame and manipulate Roman men. For is there anything better than a wife who is chaste, domestic, a good housekeeper, a rearer of children, one to gladden you in health, to tend you in sickness, to be your partner in good fortune, to console you in misfortune, to restrain the mad passion of youth, and to temper the unseasonable harshness of old age? A unicorn, as the manosphere would say, and apparently even in androcentric ancient Rome. And coincidentally, the two trusted VIP colleagues of Augustus who penned the harsh law against Roman bachelors and after whom the law was named, Quintus Papias Secundus and Marcus Papias Mutilus, died unmarried and childless. As did Hitler, discounting his last-minute wedding, and Lycurgus. Lofty words, boyos, lofty sentiments, lofty rules for thee, and not for me. Indeed, not to be born at all is best. And you'll truly start to understand that as you get older. Nevertheless, here we are. So let's break the programming.